Feudalism was weird. When we talk about history, we tend to project our understanding of the economy today on how things worked back then. But a lot of stuff back then didn't work anything like how we think it did. You know, the way their labor, the way the economy worked. A lot of people think is like, oh, a serf is when your job is to be a farmer. And buying property is just, you know, you have money and you buy the property. Like they don't understand how all this stuff was tied up into feudalism and mercantile corporations back then. Totally different systems. Like, reading on them is really, really fascinating. It was a completely different way of, like, the concept of, like, wage labor wasn't even really a thing back then. In some ways, you had a lot less freedom than you might think, and you probably already thought you didn't have much freedom, so you have less than that. A serf is basically a farmer who comes free with the property. Yeah, you can't quit, that's for sure. Like, okay, if you ever want to learn how different they were, look at the treatment of the merchant class during the feudal period. Big generalization, but do a little research onto it. Very, very interesting, okay? Because you had lots of examples of people being really wealthy because they were really effective, like, merchants, and they traded a lot, you know? And it didn't mean shit, because the real power wasn't money. The real power was the aristocracy. The king, the queen, the nobleman, you know, that whole thing. Sometimes merchants would have their shit repossessed, or they would just be killed. They could have all the money in the world, but they wouldn't be able to buy property in a town, because if that town's lord didn't like that merchant, like, who would give them that? You know what I mean? Money couldn't buy everything back then. This is a capitalism thing. This is like a modern economic thing. But, like, you can imagine it kind of, I guess, to, like, having a fuck ton of money in, like, North Korea to an extent, where it's like you can have a bunch of money in theory, but there's a set of, like, military and political, you know, connections that you would need to run through no matter what, that money can't circumvent. Whereas in the United States, if you have money, you're God. There's essentially nothing you can't do with money as long as you follow the law. And the conception of laws, again, back then, very different to what we have today. Nowadays, we have laws for, like, everything. Back then, the law was like an abstract translation and individual interpretation of a set of guiding policies that judges would just kind of riff off of, you know? Yeah, like, yeah, a lot of it was just whatever the lord or the knight wanted. But if it went to a judge or a magistrate or whatever, you know, to, like, do an arbitration or manage a property dispute, it was like, you couldn't, like, play lawyer. You know what I mean? Like, you couldn't be like, well, technically, legally, I'm allowed to do that because of this thing. If you tried that shit with the king, they'd just kill you. You know? Like, yeah, look up fugitive peasants. Simply leaving your home without permission was a crime. Serfs were just slaves. Yeah, basically. Yeah, exactly. No matter how wealthy you were, a merchant without any other... This is one of the reasons political marriages were so common back then, because you could have all the money in the world, but it wouldn't protect you from being killed unless you were, like, I don't know, the stepfather of a noblewoman, and then it's like, oh, we can't kill him, he's royalty. Like, it's not really, like, it's more complicated than that, but the connections mattered a lot more than the money in a lot of cases. And also, you could have all the money in the world, but what happens if some dude fucking shoots you with a crossbow and then takes your shit? You know, like, there's no, like, state apparatus to guarantee your wealth in the event it gets taken. Like, there's no, if shit gets taken from you, you know, you don't, the government can't, like that wealth belongs to them now. In the modern day, even if, like, thieves steal your money or whatever and get away with it, that money is stolen money, and it is, like, illegal for them to use. And if the state ever catches up to them, that will, like, that's a thing. But back then, you just take the gold. It's your gold. It's just yours now, you know?